Welcome to our latest 76 Capital Leadership Series. My name is Wayne Kimmel, and I'm your host and also Managing Director and Partner at 76 Capital. Really excited to have you on our show today. This show is a really special one. We're going to go in deep and talk about the world of being an agent for top NBA players. And we have a great guest in Jessica Holtz, the CAA's Co-Head of Basketball. But before we get started, as we always do on our 76 Capital Leadership Series, always want to sort of talk about, all the things that we do at 76 Capital. And before we even get into that, as you know, you can always reach me at Wayne Kimmel all over the internet, as well as at 76 Capital for all the things that we do, whether you're an entrepreneur, you're an executive, you're someone who really wants to get involved in the sports industry. Reach out to us. We want to talk to you. We want to talk to the entrepreneurs that are really passionate about building the next thing in the sports industry. Excited to do that, and please reach out to us. Our great producer, James Santor, back at the station running all the controls. You can reach James at James Santor on Twitter as well. And this is going to be a really exciting episode. Today, we have Jessica Holtz, an NBA agent. She's the CAA's Co-Head of Basketball. You can reach Jessica on Twitter at jholtz, and she's an agent for some of the top NBA stars out there today, whether it's Karl Anthony-Towns, Devin Booker, D'Angelo Russell, Chris Paul, and Philadelphia 76ers own Joel Embiid. Really excited to bring Jessica onto the show. Jessica, welcome to the 76 Capital Leadership Series.
Thank you, Wayne, for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to have you on the show. And as we were talking a little earlier before we got started, the last time we were together was in New York at the NBPA in February of 2020. And it felt like February of who knows how far long ago it was.
Yeah, that was a great day, and it was nice to all be together. And, hopefully we're not too far away from getting together like that again soon and, meeting with students face to face. But it's amazing that you've been able to put this together in the meantime so that we can still have some interaction.
Well, I appreciate that. And thank you for joining. I mean, it's really exciting, the things that have happened in this year for us at 76 Capital, but also for you. I mean, you're now the CAA's Co-Head of Basketball. Congratulations on that.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. It's been exciting. I've taken on additional roles and responsibilities within the basketball group. Working on and off the court with Devin Booker and Karl Anthony-Towns. Them allowing me to use my role and grow along with, the great support I have from my group to take on the on-court responsibilities is exciting. But what I'm really excited about is for my own personal growth, but more so, growth within the industry. There's not a lot of females in this position. There's only a couple. And so I think it's really cool. One, their trust in me and their belief in me, regardless, as a great person for the job. But also hoping, that means that seeing different people in different positions can allow others to, envision themselves there too. So that's what I'm really excited about.
Well, and that's perfect, because it's really what this show is all about. It's really all about, highlighting the leaders in the sports industries, the executives like you, the entrepreneurs who are trying to do the next things, the athletes who are also interested in getting themselves into the business world and really becoming leaders in the industry. So one of the things that we do on our 76 Capital Leadership Series is really I'd love to hear the story behind Jessica Holtz. How did you get here? Why don't we start with where you grew up?
I grew up in Bergen County, New Jersey, so living right outside Manhattan. So I know this Philly crowd, we're going to have some Philly, New York headbutting throughout this conversation, but my husband's from Philly. But I'm the oldest of three girls, and so watching sports was a way to hang out with our dad. And that's kind of how I got into it. Also Jets, Mets, and Rangers. We don't need to talk about the football aspect of things. I'm a Penn State Nittany Lion fan when it comes to football right now. But I grew up just loving sports, and again, when it comes to my dad and just looking up to him and hanging out with him, I was a little bit of a tomboy too. So I was a fan a long time ago. That sort of evolves as you get into the business. Your fandom changes in very different ways. But yeah, I grew up outside the New York area, like super, super passionate.
So I think, we may have lost a little bit of what you said earlier, about your husband and the Philadelphia thing, because, it's COVID, it's crazy connections. It doesn't matter. But
No.
you said your husband also he's from the Philly area. And so he's
My husband's from Philly. He went to Lower Merion High School where Kobe Bryant was from. So yeah, he's diehard Sixers, Eagles, Flyers. So he Phillies too. Huge Philadelphia fan. So
how does that work in the household? When the Sixers are playing the Knicks, how does that go down?
Well, funny that you asked that because, over the years, when I first got to the NBA, and we'll obviously get into that, I started to realize you can't just be an outward fan of one team. I represented, all of the players and the retired players. So, again, the paradigm of the way I viewed things shifted a little bit. So it's not so much Knicks, Sixers, and obviously I have skin in the game when it comes to Joel, and rooting for him. So it's more, when he goes and watches the Eagles all day and I'm not really interested whatsoever, that's more the difference. But I love that he can support Joel in loving the Sixers, but it's not such a head-to-head thing now just because of the way I view it. I'm a fan of my clients. So as long as he's rooting for them alongside with me, we're good.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, well, in growing up, did you play sports? Did you as well?
I actually played sort of everything growing up, doing rec leagues, the normal. Like I said, I was a tomboy. I wasn't really into dance classes or anything like that. And then I played high school tennis, which I love tennis. But I wasn't good enough to do anything beyond that. So, I'm a avid Peloton spinner right now, and that's the extent of my athletic prowess.
Well, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. So you mentioned you went to Penn State,
Mm-hmm.
and when with going to Penn State, did that start to lead you into the sports industry, or was there something else that brought you there?
Sports was actually always obviously a passion and a fandom. And it's really interesting when people are looking to get into the sports industry, they always say, I'm a fan of sports. And I kind of say, that's great and helpful, but you could still be a fan of sports and not work in sports. Just keep that in mind. There's plenty of people in this world that are huge sports fans that don't work in the industry. So, you have to be a fan of the business of sports to work in sports. And so I wanted to be a reporter, and I majored in broadcast journalism at Penn State. I went there for the sports though. I went in all these different schools, and I'll never forget this. I went to my visit at Penn State, and of course, strategically, my parents had me go on a football Saturday. So going up to Beaver Stadium and seeing a game, I just fell in love with the campus. It was a beautiful sunny day. I'll never forget it. And hearing, a crowd of 108,000 people roaring was just, it was magical. And so knowing that the academics were there too, it was kind of a no-brainer. So I went there as a sports fan also, but I went, as a journalism major, and I wanted to be a reporter. I wanted to focus on sports if I could. A couple of my heroes, Erin Andrews, Katie Couric, I always looked up to, and sort of thinking about what they do. But then it kind of shifted at some point. One, you're lucky to get me in front of the camera today. I'm not really a camera person. I didn't like.
Thank you.
Yeah, I didn't like doing it. I didn't like being in front of the camera. And so I got an internship at the NBA league office between my junior and senior year of college on the production side, and being behind the camera. And that was where it started to shift for me. And I say this all the time to people trying to figure out what they want to do too. It doesn't necessarily have to come in the package that you think. Your career doesn't have to necessarily come in the package that you think it's going to come in. You can figure out your why of why do I want to do this and what about this excites me. And I did that. And I was kind of like, okay, why do I want to be a sports reporter? The excitement, the high paced energy, the pressure, I loved all of that stuff. And, there's aspects of that fit in behind the camera too. So I interned at the NBA on the production side. And obviously that being a great fit, just what a NBA fan I was. And then starting to look for my job after college, a job opened up in the NBA, and, I kind of fell in love with working at the league at that point. It was such a cool internship. I mean, we got to do really cool things in bonding and going to the Yankees games. We had lunch with Adam Silver, who was deputy commissioner at the time. We had lunch with David Stern, who was commissioner at the time. And it was just so cool being at the league office. I said to myself, I want to find a job that makes sense, but I would love it to be at the NBA. And so they had a job open up in the player marketing group in their associate program that I went for. And the associate program, again, in addition to the internship, I can't say enough great things about the development there. And actually, there are 2 other people that were in my associate class of 14 that also work at CAA with me, which is so cool. Michael Tellum, who we co-represent, Joel Embiid, he's his agent, and Julia Cheney, who works on our brand consulting side. But it just kind of goes to show you the power of networking too. That's a network that I ran through the list the other day. We have somebody else who was in the associate program who works at CAA, and I listed, I think there's like 7 or 8 of us who are in the industry across different organizations, whether it's teams, MLS, et cetera, different agencies. So, you never know when you're networking. Even at 22 years old, I made lifelong networking friends at that point. But being in the player marketing group, I kind of realized, okay, this is everything I wanted out of being a sports reporter. It's giving me more, but now I can be a little bit more broad-based, and I like it, and I can lean into it, and I don't have to worry about the camera and all that. So that role was really exciting. And in that role, I got to be representing, if you will, which I use that word because it's a good transition to my career now, all 450 NBA players in the league's interest and all the retired players. And I got to work day to day with them and all of their agents, and also the league departments to figure out the best way to utilize the assets that the NBA has to market itself, which would be, the NBA, the players and their images. So that was, the first 5 years of my career.
Wow, that's incredible. So we're so lucky to have Jessica Holtz, NBA agent, CAA's head of basketball, co-head of basketball, on our show today. I mean, it's really incredible. She's hasn't even gotten to some of the the incredible athletes and NBA players that she now works with. Excited to talk about that. But I mean, just your career, working your way up in the industry at the NBA. I mean, the stories that of people that I know and people that have gotten to know over the years who have gotten trained at the NBA, who got the opportunity to work under David and Adam. It's just amazing. I mean, the list is so long, and it's incredibly impressive. So, so once you're at the NBA, how did you transition from working at the NBA to getting into the agent side of the world?
Yeah. And again, I love that you said, all the great executives that have worked under David and Adam, because, in addition to the associate program I mentioned earlier, I almost call working at the NBA, like another college 2.0. I love when you are in conversations with people and they also went to your college, you get excited, you start trying to connect dots, you reminisce. It's very similar when you talk about the NBA. Who did you work with over there? What department were you in? Who'd you roll up into? So it's really exciting that I also have that network to work with, because again, there's really great people sprinkled throughout the industry and still at the league office that I work with every day. But I felt in my role, that I loved working individually with the players, and I loved, leaning into that aspect of it more. So instead of working for the logo, I wanted to work for the individual players. And so at that point, I went to go work at Excel Sports, which I was at for 3 years. It was a small budding company at the time. I think I was like the 14th employee, and now they've grown to much bigger than that, maybe around 100. I'm not sure. Somebody from Excel could probably tell you better. But it was great, really exciting, good for me to get my feet wet, learn the agency business. I worked with really great clients over there too. Tyson Chandler, Kevin Love, CJ McCollum. And so I got some really, really great experience, both working at a smaller company, coming from a bigger company, and working with those guys directly.
When you were at CAA, when you were at Excel,
years, I started talking to the folks at CAA a little bit, and just, going back to a bigger global company for me, felt like, a way to grow. And so I've been at CAA 6 years at this point. And our basketball business has also really grown in the time I've been there, which has been so exciting to be a part of. I believe we had 25 clients when I first started, and now we're up to 80 or so, which has been super, super fun to be part of. When I started working with Chris Paul and Paul George. They were already on the roster at the time. So that was August of 2014. And then that next draft class was the draft of 2015. And we ended up recruiting and signing Karl Towns, who was the first pick, D'Angelo Russell, who was the second pick, and Devin Booker, who was the 13th pick. So I'll never forget how busy I was in those few months with those three guys, and how they panned out. It's been so fun and so exciting to watch them on their journey from draft picks to, max contract players and superstars in the NBA, all-stars, all three of them, which has been super cool. And then, Joel, just again, for this audience to get excited about, he hadn't played in the NBA when we signed him too. So being part of his journey, when he obviously struggled and worked so hard to come back for those 2 years, being him also all-star global superstar has been super fun. So that was sort of how I got into CAA and sort of started working with the guys I've been working with. So it's been at least 5 years for all of them.
It's really incredible. I mean, and I think that you talked about initially Chris working with Chris Paul and Paul George. For our audience out there, that are either listening to the podcast or watching this on YouTube, what is it like? What do you, when you work with a player, what does that really mean? And then what are some of the things that you actually do, for and with them?
Well, something that's really important to think about too is this is a service business. So our clients. And so that differs between who it means, right? So your job is and your job is to protect their career, and your job is to make it so that they can worry about what they need to worry about. You take care of what you can take care of, and just sort of be a support system for them in their careers. It's to make them money. It's to protect, what their careers and that money, and make sure that's all being managed properly. But I take it personal. I will say, they've become friends, and it's not about being their friends, but it's sort of, we're partners in this. And, I care a lot. And so working day to day, it's, every little thing that needs to be taken care of between myself, our team, our broader company, and what are your dreams? What should we accomplish? What's the timeline for accomplishing them? What deals can we get you that, position you in the way that you want to be positioned? Where are you at in terms of your growth, right? And, what you want to do, it's an evolution of what businesses you want to do, what you want to be a part of. When you first sign into the NBA, you're excited if you can get a free car and some trading cards. And, depending on if you're the number one pick, you get a bunch of endorsement deals and commercials and stuff like that. But that grows over time. And how are we continuously having that dialogue to make sure that we're supporting you and your growth too? So I know I used a lot of words and business terminology then, but working with a player really is, if I boil it down, relationship and support.
Well, that's very, very helpful. And I think one of the things that's, kind of breaking it down maybe even a little bit more, and just talking about the shoe deals. I mean, you've done some pretty amazing, groundbreaking shoe deals with some of your clients. Love to hear some of those stories.
Yeah, the shoe deals are obviously important. They're wearing them 82 games a year on the court, and they are a way to build businesses, and they are a way to be able to accomplish things. The companies that we work with, and we work with a lot of companies across CAA, right? With Nike, Brand Jordan, we work with Li Ning, we work with Adidas, we work with New Balance, and are we figuring out the best match for each player and that brand, what the shoe brand's trying to accomplish? And they're just like, a lot of them are in different stages too. I'll go back to Joel and Under Armour for a minute. he's the face of Under Armour basketball. Steph has his Steph Curry brand, and Joel is their big global guy on their roster. And so, how are we telling stories together? How are we helping figure out the best way to tell stories through shoe design? So it's those relationships are really deep and really fun and really exciting. And those are the biggest partnerships after. Generally speaking, they're the biggest partnerships after your team deal. And so, those are fun to work through, and there's a lot of opportunity there.
Yeah. I mean, how does it work? I mean, maybe, how do you decide, on an Under Armour versus a Nike or versus, any of the other brands, the Adidas is out there. I mean, and is it a lot, does it come down to the deal at times, or does it come down to the players, what they like, what they feel? Like, how do you work through that?
It comes down to, and I would, why is weighted differently amongst different guys, right? I mean, and every person that I mentioned, is at a different scale of somebody maybe starting out as a rookie who's excited about free product. So there's different variation and different levels of whys there. It is about the people. You want to meet with them. You want to talk to them. The process of sometimes figuring out if you're changing shoe companies, why am I changing? What are we going to accomplish over there? How do I want to be positioned? Are they going in the direction I'm going in? Are we starting something new together? Are we building on something existing together? Where are we at? Where are you at? Can we meet in the middle? Does that work? These aren't relationships that you would just enter into and you say, okay, check the box. They're, generally longer term. They're generally bigger promotionally wise. So how are we looking at this together long term in our growth?
Well, once again, we're here with Jessica Holtz, NBA agent, CAA's co-head of basketball. Super excited to have you on our show. And Jessica, it's interesting, here at 76 Capital, we're investors in the sports tech industry, and we do a lot of investments in the esports world. I love to, hear how, the relationship that you have with a number of the players that you're involved with. I mean, did they talk with you about their interest in the video game industry or, competing on the esports side of things? How do those conversations go?
There are a lot of NBA players who are avid gamers. I mean, I would say that is maybe in some cases their second biggest passion if I'm painting a broader brush. The gaming industry has so much opportunity right now. And this very well from your business interests, but I don't know where the limit is, and the sky is the limit, and there's so much opportunity there. It's almost like too big sometimes. Like, how do we best navigate this? How do we best add to your portfolio? Because the gaming brand for some of these guys and how they interact with the gaming industry is becoming a really critical piece to the puzzle for them, for their overall brand. Devin Booker won the 2K tournament that the NBA held closer to the beginning of when we were shut down in quarantine. And, him being the best NBA 2K player is something that he really is proud of. And it's working with all these different video game companies. And, it's kind of cool. We say this when we first sign guys too, or when they first get into the NBA, you're getting paid to play two games you love. You're getting paid to play basketball and you're getting paid to play video games. Opportunities there are so authentic. They're not, let me sign a deal. It's, this is something that maybe I grew up playing and I never dreamed I would be able to be a part of. And now I am. And isn't that just incredible? And so navigating that world, and it's ever changing. There's different platforms. Am I streaming on Twitch? Am I working with a hardware company? Am I working with a software company? Am I working with controllers? Am I working with headphones? I learned so much. I don't even know how to play any video games, but I've learned so much about all the different layers of ways that you can interact and ways that you can build together. It's just super exciting. And I love that, gamers are fans of NBA players and NBA players are fans of gamers, and they're figuring out the best way to tell their stories together. And, you see some players investing in esports teams as well and getting involved as they can. And then you see, some esports athletes showing up at NBA. And so I think that crossover is something that I focus on a lot of my day-to-day, actually, and building relationships with a lot of those brands and figuring out the best way strategically to grow together, because the gaming industry is only going up, NBA players' profiles are only going up, and how can we maximize that together is, a really big, important question right now.
It's really fascinating to hear you talk about this. And I think the most interesting thing you said, and I think it's the most important thing, is how authentic it is, right? I mean, when you're someone who has spent a lot of time on the sports marketing side and now is the co-head of basketball for CAA. I mean, it's all about building that authentic relationship, because you all of a sudden you just can't force that, right?
Right. No, and again, I don't want to speak so broadly, and I can speak to my experience and I can try to generalize it as much as possible. But there's a lot that goes into partnerships, then, especially comparatively to the salary that a lot of NBA players get on the floor, right? So they're not going to just enter into partnerships and promote just any old thing in a lot of ways. And I think you're seeing a lot of shift between, hey, I'm just going to show up, take my picture, let me hold a product and move on. That does make sense in some cases, and it is, exciting. But I think you're seeing a lot more of authenticity because of social media. And obviously, I'm sure that's a big topic we'll cover, but you kind of can't hide from who you are and what you're if you're going to be out there. And so the authenticity of gaming, it's just, people can tell, people can read through that, the brands can tell. And so when you are authentic to yourself, everybody just gets so much more out of it. And so that's why I spend so much time in the gaming space, because I know it's one conversation if I'm like, hey, this random beverage that you haven't tried yet wants to work with you, versus, hey, this game that you tell your friends you're the best at and trash talk about every day because you have so much fun doing it, they want to work with you for a quarter of the price. That's kind of a no-brainer in a way. And I don't know that people totally realize that, but a lot of times when you see these partnerships and these guys are doing this, they are so excited and so passionate and have had aspirations of being part of that for a very long time.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one of the things I had to ask you, Jessica, it's funny. My nephew, he's the biggest fan of Chris Paul, I think because of State Farm, right? I don't think he's too young to even know that he sees the commercials and he thinks they're the funniest things. You know what? I laugh as well. How did something like that come about?
I'm so glad you said that. And that's super cool that that's creating its own fan base and has created its own fan base. I mean, and the commercials have evolved over the years, right? I mean, Cliff Paul is one of the more famous TV characters. And actually, Chris went on JJ Redick's podcast the other day, which is great for all the followers out there. Everybody should give a listen to The Old Man and the Three. Really great content that JJ and Tommy Alter create. But they did a draft, because they do drafts all the time, best TV or movie mustache characters. And Chris took Cliff as the first pick. And JJ and Tommy were devastated because he's so iconic in TV characters at this point, which is fun and exciting. But that's kind of created a cool cultural moment. And then I think every year now people are just excited for what State Farm and Chris came up with together to work through it. But I just have to keep going back to authenticity, and I don't mean hammering this home. You saw Chris's son, little Chris, being part of it this year. You're recreating a little bit of the scene of what that would be like at home if Jake from State Farm was just happened to be in the Paul's backyard. And so I think when you're able to channel that, and Chris is involved in looking at the creative, making sure it makes sense for him and his brand. And then, State Farm does so much on the charitable side, which is so important to Chris. So I think the fact that your nephew is sort of excited about and relates that partnership to Chris is exactly what we're talking about when we're putting together really strategic partnerships. Because if that relationship wasn't so longstanding and it wasn't so much of a partnership, and it was sort of one way or the other, or you had State Farm sort of like putting a script in front of him and saying like, read these lines. I don't know that your nephew would feel like that. I don't know that your nephew would be such a fan of it, but because Translation, the agency who represents State Farm, they do such a great job on the creative, but it's really a partnership. I think that that's sort of what your nephew is sensing without totally even knowing that's what he's sensing.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, when the fake Chris Paul jumps through the window of his house, I mean, I laugh every time. I don't even I've seen it. I can't even tell how many times I've seen it. I think it's just so funny. But you're right. I mean, it's really something. It's really a really great way that you've been able to use, connect brands and the players that you work with. I mean, what has it been like during COVID? I mean, certainly. Well, actually, let's just before we even during COVID, let's talk about the COVID and the bubble. What was it like kind of having all of your players that were there? Not, normally kind of, I would assume your normal schedule is going city to city, sitting down with your players and their families. And then all of a sudden they're in a bubble.
Right.
What was that like?
Well, I'll just go back to, where everybody else was. I'll never forget. I was actually watching the Jazz Thunder game on March 11th, real time. We have players on both teams, Donovan Mitchell, Mike Conley, Royce O'Neal, and then we have Chris and Danilo Gallinari at the time on the Thunder. And so I was excited for the game, turned it on, and it was just something wasn't right. The beginning music was playing and they weren't tipped off, and I don't think I'll forget sitting on the couch going, what is wrong? What is happening here? This is so strange. And from that moment on, it just became, let's figure this out as we go. And then the next day we left our office and they told us, I think it would be at least, we'll see you guys hopefully in 2 weeks. And that would be it. And so I think, being creative in this time in general is what we've all learned. And so when you say that, what's it like in a normal scenario, going to see all your players, going to the game, seeing them in person, just like the rest of us have had to do with anything, we've had to figure out a new norm. It's getting on Zooms instead of going to dinner after a game. It's in that immediate aftermath, we have all these obligations, right? We had a national TV commercial shoot with Joel that we had to cancel because of the virus right away. And it was better safe than sorry. And we didn't know that the season was going to be over when we canceled that shoot. I believe that was the day before the 11th. It might have been the 10th or something like that. And now it's just sort of now we're in a new normal. But in that very beginning phase, it was, okay, how do we work with sponsors? There's no games going on. There's no TV going on. How do we work with sponsors to make sure they feel whole? What types of commercial shoots are we doing now? I've done full commercial shoots virtually where you have somebody sitting over a computer to ask them questions that they'd normally be sitting in front of them in a chair to ask them. And so in some senses, it feels like it's been a really long time since we've seen each other when we're used to traveling around. But then in other senses, it's a relationship, right? So there's clients that I have seen since then when it's like, hey, I feel like I just saw you yesterday because we've been doing Zooms and we've been doing FaceTime and we've been talking and we've been working through it. So, and then when you asked about the bubble specifically, I just think that was hard in general. NBA players aren't used to playing games, not in front of fans, not with their family supporting them at the games, not in Orlando in a hotel, the same hotel every day for, in some cases over 100 days. And I think it was just really a new challenge, but something that, everybody had to get used to. And now we're in the midst of a new challenge, right? We're starting the NBA season. A couple of teams, a few teams are having fans, some are not. What does this look like? The guys are getting tested every day. And there's just new norms that we're constantly adjusting to. I think humans are really adaptable people. And I think we've all proven that in this time. But yeah, now we figured out how to work around it. And we'll work around it as long as we need to. Hopefully, we go back to some sense of normalcy as it relates to, all the off the court stuff sooner rather than later. But, the NBA does have rules and restrictions in terms of shoots, right? We can't have an 80-person national TV commercial shoot because of the virus. And so what does that look like? How are we pivoting? But I think, the more creative you are in this time, the more you're going to get done because we have to work around it.
So, I mean, I think that, you talked about what you needed to do to kind of work around COVID and all the different restrictions and just quite frankly, just being safe. I mean, none of us want to get sick. I mean, so how has certainly you mentioned Zoom, but what about, let's just talk about in general, social media, even putting COVID aside, right? I mean, just how much of an impact social media has become with the lives of your players, your business, when you started as compared to where it is now today.
Yeah, I think I looked the other day. I think I joined Twitter in like 2008, since you have my Twitter handle up. And that was about a year after I started working. And I just remember following every player and trying to understand, like, what are they saying? But I think it's a really good way for them to tell their own story now, especially because we're not having access like we did before, in person. Even the reporters asking questions, through the computer, they're not used to that either. So right now, I'll look at it as a vacuum versus over time. Obviously, it's continuously changed, but it's a way for them to get their voice out there and a way for them to tell their version of the story and a way for them to sort of give people a peek into who they are. I think I might have mentioned this earlier. When you're talking about authenticity too, people do get to know you through what you put up or feel like they know you in some cases. And so it's been really exciting. It's obviously been an opportunity for them to interact with brands and share brand messaging, which is exciting. But, just again, from a personal standpoint, it's been a way. Here's my pet. Here's what I do when I'm home. Here's what video games I play. And then again, turn the brand opportunity on that end. But I think especially now too, just sort of seeing like, hey, I'm like you, I'm at home. Let's all be safe and let's try to make sure we're social distancing and doing what we do. I actually think that's been super encouraging.
Yeah, I mean, have you had situations where any of your clients have come to you to ask you for advice around what should they say, shouldn't they say, how they should use social media? Do you just have those conversations directly with your clients?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think there's certain best practices if you're trying to accomplish certain things that we've learned and that we can share and that we've studied. I think, sometimes there are messages that you need to make sure are put out the right way, especially when they pertain to really important issues or issues that are complicated. But again, I couldn't say something in a lot of my clients' voice better than they can. So I could try, but I sound like Jess and they sound like them. So, that's, I think, the cool thing. You're seeing, okay, even if somebody else is hitting the tweet button because they're so busy and they have all these partnerships going on and they have a great company and voice behind them helping them do it, it's still in their sensibility and it's still in their voice. So yeah, there's certainly guidance in terms of really important or bigger picture issues, but day to day, I can't say better, here's my dog, isn't he great, than they can.
Right. Totally understand. Again, it's so great that Jess, to have you on our 76 Capital Leadership Series. Jess Holtz, NBA agent, CAA's co-head of basketball, working with Karl Anthony-Towns, Devin Booker, D'Angelo Russell, Chris Paul, Joel Embiid, and many, many more of the clients at CAA. Jessica, speaking of some of the things that, that you have to work with your clients. I mean, they get drafted to one team and then they get traded or they get moved to a different team. What is that like, when you have a player who kind of sets down their roots somewhere and then gets traded and then the next day they got to go play somewhere else? How do you deal with that?
Well, D'Angelo obviously comes to mind when we talk about that. And a really, really interesting career. D'Angelo got drafted to the Lakers as the number 2 pick. Spent a couple of seasons there, then got traded to the Brooklyn Nets. Spent a couple of seasons there, signed with the Golden State Warriors, had a little bit of time there, and then got traded to the Minnesota Timberwolves last February. So He's been on 4 teams in his 6 seasons in the NBA. But you can only control it. He says this best. I'm quoting him directly right now, actually. You can only control what you can control. And so I think that taught him sort of to be a little bit resilient in terms of knowing, okay, while I'm here, I'm going to make the most of this opportunity and maximize this city. And, he's got a great fan base, right? He's got New Yorkers. He's got people from LA. He's got people from San Francisco. So, and now he plays for Minnesota, which is a super passionate fan base. So he's sort of like, hey, I have all these fans in all these different places. I'm going to tap into them. Is it shocking sometimes when you get traded and you don't know? Of course, that is the business. Ideally, we like to understand what's going on as much as possible. But that is the name of the game. And sometimes you're the beneficiary of it. And sometimes, you're somewhere that you love, but then you go on and you adjust somewhere else. It's the same thing as when you change jobs in our careers now, except the difference is you won't ever get, hey, I work at 76 Capital today and tomorrow I work at CAA. That's not how it works. But, it's new, and then you're the new person at the new place, and then you have to try to adjust and make a new network and make new friends and in that case, figure out a new system and new players to play with and what's my role here and how do I best fit? So they're humans like anyone else. Sometimes when they're looking at, do I buy a house here? Do I not buy a house here? They have to think about that a lot of times. It's very unique to this job. It doesn't happen to the rest of us, like I said. But I think D'Angelo would say better than I can for him, just how much he's learned through those experiences and being part of different organizations and what he's seen that works really well and what he can contribute. And so I think it's all learning and growth experience.
You think about, today's athlete, today's NBA player, they're so multi-talented. I mean, they have so many different interests. They're so talented, as you said, whether it's on the court or in many cases, they're amazing at video games, and many are also amazing at business and are interested in the business side of the world and want to be, in and around entrepreneurs and tech, stars and, just the overall world. How does that kind of come about how do those conversations go with some of your clients and some of the things that they may, has it been different in the last several years as kind of the entrepreneurial interest that some of your clients have as compared to the past?
I think so. I think, you don't have so many household names in business from, again, when I started becoming first a fan of the NBA. You've obviously got Magic and Michael Jordan. He's done with the Jordan brand and owning a team and a NASCAR team. That's incredible. And I think you're seeing this younger generation of guys who, unfortunately for Michael Jordan, probably make more in their first contract than, he might have made his whole career. And so that gives them a luxury to be able to focus on that a little bit more in addition to their career, obviously in their off time. But these are people who are the best at what they do. And you don't get to be the best at what you do without thinking big picture, having big goals, seeing visions differently than other people. And I think that's what I've really learned throughout my career is sort of that sentiment of why, business leaders and NBA players feel like they can really connect now. And, there's certain products that NBA players want to invest in because they use them, they believe in them, and they have some commonalities and that they share with, the founders of the companies, and they've been able to connect more. And so when those conversations, a lot of times they start with like, hey, I really like this. Like, do we know them? We should talk to them. What would a relationship look like with them? Can we start to explore that? It is a lot of times my job to figure out, what are you interested in? How can we help you maximize that interest? Do you want to just buy the product and move on with your day? Do you want to be part of the business? Do you want to build with someone? Do you want to endorse it? Like, what does that look like? Do we want to just network with them because you can learn something and, maybe they're a fan of you and there's a mutual connection there. But again, I think that there's a lot in common with the discipline, the intellect that comes with being, one of the best at something in the world. And when you're talking about a lot of these corporations, they're the best business leaders in the world. I'm talking about some of the best basketball players in the world, that it's not just about a sport. You don't get to be the best basketball player in the world by showing up on the court when you, the audience, see them playing the games. There's practice, there's treatment, there's watching film. It's a job that's around the clock, and it's waking up early, and it's getting home late, and it's waking up the next day to do it all over again. And it's a lot harder than it looks. But again, I think that you're seeing business and basketball, traditional business, I should say, with companies and brands, and them understanding that and figuring out, okay, we have these shared commonalities. What can we do that's special together?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit it right on the head. It's one of the things that we talk a lot about at 76 Capital is the same kind of passion and desire and persistence and drive that you need to have to be successful, to be one, as you said, one of the best in the world on the court. Those same types of traits you need to have to be successful and to be the best in the business world. So when you bring together individuals that have those same kinds of traits, it's really magical to watch. And we bring different athletes to the entrepreneurs and CEOs of a number of our portfolio companies. The conversation's amazing. You never know where it's going to go. It could just turn into my Nerd Street Gamers hat back here. I mean, Emmanuel Sanders, next thing you know, he and our CEO, John Fazio from Nerd Street, I mean, they just start to game together. They just play, and they just love, and that's their way to communicate, right? I mean, it's you never know how these things will turn out, but you're right. It's really incredible to see that level of competitiveness as well as persistence, which is just such an important thing, because as you said, you gotta get up the next day. You're gonna get knocked down. You're gonna have a tough game. You gotta come out the next day to go do it again. You can't just give up, and that's the same business.
And belief in yourself when you're a basketball player, belief in your product when you're starting a company, those are really strong drivers. And that's what's, at the end of the day, a through line with it. And then you're right. If it's, hey, I'm a family guy, then we find the other commonalities and we find the other interests. And that's when the special nature of the partnership comes about. But I feel really lucky to be a facilitator of those conversations. And that's where, my why comes in a lot of times with, wow, you have this dream, you have this product you have this company you want to work with, you have this sensibility, you have this commonality with a certain person. How can I connect the dots here, and then let the talent just run and help build the business however I can. But that's what's so cool about my job a lot of times, and those are some of my favorite moments, when it starts as a conversation, brainstorming, again, formerly a dinner table, now probably a Zoom, of, hey, I really like this. And then next thing you know, there's something we built together, some product that we've built together. Show, on the production side, specifically for Chris, a lot of times that we've built. So that's, my role, the coolest part.
Well, as we begin to wrap up here on our 76 Capital Leadership Series, Jess, this has been amazing. I mean, Jess's background is as an NBA agent, co-head of basketball at CAA, agent for stars like Karl Anthony-Towns, Devin Booker, D'Angelo Russell, Chris Paul, Joel Embiid, and you've heard some amazing stories. I think one last question I'd love to ask you. I mean, we probably could have this conversation all day, Jess, but I mean, I'd love to know just what's next for you personally at CAA. When really, as you now as the co-head of basketball, where do you see things going for you personally?
I love and fear that question at the same time, Wayne. And I think it's because I always am trying to reinvent myself, but I want to be the expert at the same time. And so doing those two things at the same time and constantly trying to grow is, where I try to think day to day. Sometimes, you're focused on what's in front of you and just getting those tasks in hand done. Sometimes you want to look at the bigger picture. But I really have let sort of my clients and their vision and their dreams and what I like and what I lean into in working with them sort of drive it. I didn't really even know what a player agent was when I first started working. Like I said, I wanted to be a reporter. And so I sort of learned that business, got into it, realized that's where I wanted to be, but it was driven by those relationships. And so working at a global company with so many different avenues for CAA, did I ever think that I would, be representing players on the court, probably not, until I started to get into it, or, helping build a production company in the case of Chris Paul, or helping build signature shoe lines like we talked about earlier, or, starting with a reach out to a company, and then next thing I know, I'm watching an NBA game and the commercial's on 4 times. But I like to let my work through with what I'm doing with my clients and let my experience sort of drive what's next. What am I enjoying? What am I thriving in? What do my clients need? Those are some things I think about what's next. But I'm lucky to be working with people that feel like sky is the limit. They're the best at what they do. And so they don't see ceilings for themselves. The company I work for has TV department, movie department, licensing departments. We represent properties, we represent brands, we represent talent, we represent anything. So there's no ceiling there, and I don't see a ceiling for myself. So I don't know that I could articulate to you a specific job or role, but I know that I can constantly, within all those different areas that I sit, constantly add tools to my toolkit. And that would be the one thing that I always stay focused on. How am I getting better today? When I wake up in the morning, the second I start to feel like I could do this in my sleep is the second I start to figure out I need to add something else to my plate. So that's hopefully a long-winded answer to your question.
Well, it's a great answer, and wish you a ton of luck. I really appreciate you coming on and being on our 76 Capital Leadership Series. You've given us a lot of great things. I love we got to talk about Jake from State Farm and Cliff Paul and all those superstars. But seriously, Jessica, it's been amazing. Wish you the best as now the co-head of basketball at CAA. All your clients, hope they have a great season this year in the NBA. Hope everyone stays safe and healthy, and look forward to hopefully seeing you at a game soon.
Thanks. You too. I appreciate you having me, Wayne. Thank you for putting this together. And yes, would love to reconvene soon. So fingers crossed.
Well, absolutely. Thank you, Jess, and appreciate it. And you can catch this episode as well as all of our other episodes on YouTube and also on any podcast platform that you choose. So check out all the different things that we have from our 76 Capital Leadership Series. And again, Jess, thank you so much for joining us, and everyone have a great day.